Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. I am Heena Gambhir. It is day 7 of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Indian government has issued an urgent advisory for Indians in Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine. It was in Kharkiv only. 21-year-old Indian medical student Naveen from Karnataka lost his life in shelling yesterday. The Indian government, in fact, has sent an urgent appeal to all Indian nationals in Kharkiv to leave immediately and proceed towards Pesochin, which is about 11 kilometers away, Babaye, 12 kilometers away, and Bezlyudovka, which is 16 kilometers away, on foot if need be. Now, this is very, very important because just few hours were given by the Indian government to Indian nationals living in Kharkiv to leave to the nearest safe places, the names I just now mentioned, and if possible, they've been told to walk to these safe areas. If they are able to get into local trains or buses, it's fine. Otherwise, they've been advised to walk to these safe zones latest by 6 p.m. local time or 9:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So as we speak, it's 8 o'clock. They just have 1.5 hours more to leave Kharkiv. This advisory is based on Russian inputs. The government has asked Indians to take this advice very, very seriously. And that's our top focus on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. Let me first go across to my colleague Srinjoy Chaudhary, joining us in the broadcast more on this. Srinjoy, good evening. It was a press conference by Ministry of External Affairs as well after the advisory that was issued on social media. How many students are we looking at in Kharkiv specifically, and why this sudden advisory has come today? What more can you share with us?
Well, there are probably several thousand Indians in Kharkiv, or there were at least, and a few left last night, some left early morning when trains were functioning. Now what has happened is there were inputs from Russia, quote unquote, is what we were told, which basically means that the Russians had said they would offer safe passage. Now this is the equivalent of safe passage, that they have till 9:30 Indian Standard Time or 6 o'clock in the evening local time to get out of Kharkiv. And as you rightly said, if necessary, walk, because things could get very, very dangerous after that. And that could mean basically the Russian assault through artillery, through rockets and so on. And that will mean flattening a lot of buildings. That could mean a lot of casualties. So the Russians have given us India a clear message, an input, as the External Affairs Ministry said, that, well, the Russian input is leave Kharkiv as quickly as you can. There are 3 places you can go to, 3 towns between 10 and 15 kilometers away from Kharkiv. If you go there, if you can go there by bus or train or car, fine, take it. Otherwise, if necessary, it's going to be hazardous in any case because it's the dead of winter, it's desperately cold, and people, if they have to walk, they will walk. The alternative is really not very edifying. It could mean facing the Russian onslaught. We've heard about Russian airborne divisions in the area. If that is so, they are crack troops. Plus, you have firepower coming up. So it is not going to be particularly easy, which is why Indians have been advised to leave as quickly as possible by the MEA after inputs from the Russians.
All right, Srinjoy, thank you very much for joining us with all of these details. We'll keep coming back to you for this developing story from Ukraine. Let's now move on. We are joined by Valentina Aksonova, who is advisor to Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine, and she's joining us live this evening on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Ms. Valentina, thank you very much for joining us here on Mirror Now in India. Can you tell us a little bit first how the situation is in Kharkiv? Where exactly are you right now?
Hello, thank you for having me. Right now I'm situated in Lviv. But situation in Kharkiv in comparison with Lviv is much more severe. Today we had the vacuum bomb used by Russian Federation in Kharkiv. It is very important to stress that vacuum bomb is prohibited weapon according to international military law. The vacuum bomb was used for the attempt to ruin the television tower in Kharkiv. Yesterday in Kiev, television tower was attacked as well. But today in Kharkiv, we have the same situation: the attempt of the Russians to ruin the tower. Also, we have the heavy bombing overall the city used by Russians, and I do suggest people to stay safe in shelters, in bomb shelters, or to leave the city by any means. But also the leaving of the city is also the problem, because the Russians don't give the green corridor for people to leave the city and to get the humanitarian aid by ICRC, the International Committee of Red Cross or UN, to help refugees to leave the city. So again, it's very anti-human from the Russian side not to give the opportunity to build this green corridor for people to leave the city, to organize the buses, any kind of vehicles to take people out of Kharkiv. So the situation is very hard at the moment in Kharkiv.
Okay, situation is very hard at the moment in Kharkiv, you're telling us, but Indian government has now issued an urgent advisory for Indian nationals, especially the students who are there, and they've been told to move to safer locations, and they have suggested that they should, if possible, walk to those nearby locations, which are about 10 to 15 kilometers away from Kharkiv. What exactly should we make of this, and which are the safer areas right now, in your opinion, there? Miss Valentina, can you hear me? Okay, we will try and reconnect with her in just a bit, but the situation is not looking very good in Kharkiv. Specifically, the TV tower was attacked yesterday in Kyiv, and today the same thing was reported from Kharkiv as well. Meanwhile, let's also listen in to what the government had to say to the Indian nationals who are still in Kharkiv, and then we'll try and go back to Valentina.
The advisory that has just been issued by our embassy a little while ago, and also by us, on the need for our nationals to leave Kharkiv immediately, is on the basis of information received from Russia. We would urge all our nationals to leave Kharkiv immediately to the safe zones or further westwards, using any means available, including on foot, and keeping safety in mind. I'm happy to inform that there has been a sharp increase in the number of Indians who have left Ukraine over the recent past. We now estimate that nearly 17,000 Indian nationals have left Ukraine's borders since our advisories were issued. This, of course, includes some Indians who had not registered with the embassy earlier. So the 70,000 is a pretty high number. As you remember, Foreign Secretary mentioned a number of, I think, around 12,000 yesterday. Flights under Operation Ganga have also increased sharply. During the last 24 hours, 6 flights have landed in India, taking the total number of flights that have landed in India to 15, and the total number of Indians who have returned on these flights to 3,352.
And Valentina Aksonova is back with us, advisor to Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine, to help us understand how the situation is in Ukraine right now, because an urgent advisory has gone from Indian government. Ms. Valentina, I was trying to understand from you which are the locations around Kharkiv which are slightly safe in your opinion, because the Indians there have been asked to move towards the western part of the country, or the three locations, three towns within 10 to 15 kilometers from Kharkiv.
At this moment, Kharkiv has very hard situation. There was severe bombing at this moment. Russia has used vacuum bombing today, which is restricted by international law, restricted weapon, very powerful weapon, the most powerful except the nuclear weapon they have. And also we have several severe airstrikes during the whole day, and I think the airstrike continue today and are going to continue in the evening and the night time. So I do suggest the people who are staying in Kharkiv to hide in a safe place, in shelters, or try to leave the city. But leaving the city is now very problematic due to that Russians don't give the opportunity, organize the green corridor for humanitarian aid to take people away. So International Committee of Red Cross and Ukrainian Authority, they complained that Russians don't give the opportunity to make this corridor. And it is very hard to leave the city by using the only rail and some regular buses that we have at this moment. And I do suggest, if there is any information from Russia's side about the evacuation, this information is not trustworthy. What Russians are doing now in many towns, they use people as the live sheet. They lure people by announcing the evacuation, and they use them as the live sheet to protect their military columns and to penetrate into the territory. So please do not follow, do not use, and you can't trust the information from Russians. The only trustworthy information in Ukraine is the information from humanitarian organizations such as ICRC or UN and Ukrainian authorities.
Ms. Valentina, we are also being told, because Russian military is now claiming that they have taken control of Ukraine's Kherson. What is the situation there, and how far are the troops from the capital city of Kyiv?
First, about Kherson. Kherson is not actually totally occupied by Russians. It's not under total control of Russians. Russians are penetrating into the city, but the battles are still occurring and continuing now for the city to be free from any occupants. According to the information about Kyiv, Kyiv they are trying to circle Kyiv around, especially from the Belarusian side. So they use the Belarus as the base for their militaries to penetrate into Ukrainian territory. And they are mostly using the northern direction to get into the capital as closer as they can. So most of the battles are taking place around the city in districts of Kyiv, in such cities as Irpin, Borodyanka, Gostomel, Dymer, Demidov, Detyatki, but not in capital itself. There's been 7 days since the Russians were trying to capture Ukrainian capital or to capture any big Ukrainian city, but they didn't manage to do this. So the blitzkrieg, which was planned by Putin to occupy all the Ukraine in 2 days, didn't work. And it will not work because Ukraine is not going to drop down the weapons. We are going to resist.
Well, we are seeing stiff resistance clearly from Ukraine as well. Last question before we let you go. Second round of talks, we are being told, is likely to happen tonight, was supposed to happen between Russia and Ukraine. What is the status?
As we know, Russian delegation already moved to the point of the meeting, and we are going to have the second round of negotiations this evening. The position of Russians is the ultimatum. And this is not acceptable from Ukrainian side because, as stated, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, negotiations are negotiations. This is not the ultimatum from the one side. This is where the sides are listening to each other and trying to have the decision, to find decision. But what Russia do, they just want their ultimatum to be counted, and this position is not acceptable for Ukraine. Position of Ukraine is no capitulation and no resistance, and Ukraine is going to resist.
All right, Ms. Valentina Aksonova, I appreciate you joining us here on Mirror Now this evening. Requesting you as well to stay safe. Thank you very much for speaking with us and helping us understand how the situation is right now. And let's now move on. And there's some breaking update that we are getting for our viewers at this point in time. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to chair a high-level meeting on the issue of Ukraine at 8:30 p.m. tonight. In just a few minutes from now, there's going to be another high-level meeting that will be chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi to discuss the situation, the evolving situation in Ukraine. Over the last 48 hours, we have seen Prime Minister chairing several such meetings, but this one is going to be very, very crucial because just a few hours ago, an urgent advisory has been issued by the Indian government for Indians in Kharkiv specifically. Mirror Now's editor, Nikunj Garg, is joining us on the broadcast for more on this. Nikunj, good evening. What more do we know about this high-level meeting planned at 8:30 p.m. tonight?
Well, Heena, quite clearly, he needs to review the entire unfolding situation. Quite clearly, this is the first day when we have pushed in Indian Air Force C-130J Hercules and Globemasters into action. Quite clearly, it's a big departure from earlier policy of using only the civil aircrafts in a war-torn zone. Quite clearly, it has its own ramifications involved. And whenever military aircraft take to sky in such trouble-torn regions, there are consequences that can be involved. And quite clearly, there are now 2 reports of deaths of students from that region. So the fact remains that there is obviously a growing domestic about safety and security of rest of the Indians present in Ukraine. And the fact is that the MEA is claiming that nearly 60% of all Indians have been evacuated from Ukraine, but quite clearly they have come under concerted pressure from the opposition, which has been consistently raising as to why the entire operation of evacuation or safe passage for the Indian students and Indian citizens was delayed. So Prime Minister obviously has to take stock of the situation. He has to amalgamate all the action that the government's various wings, including the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Civil Aviation, Ministry of External Affairs, and other ministries are taking. Many members of his cabinet have already been pushed into traveling, receiving, meeting, mitigating the issues raised by the student community and others. And that quite clearly gives you an indication that politically they are feeling the heat. And at such a moment, quite clearly he would like to be seen in charge of the entire rescue operations. Because remember, the fact remains that the Prime Minister's office will have to pivot this entire multi-ministerial effort to evacuate citizens and students to the last man. And that is what he probably wants, a latest update on the situation. And if the situation is taking any grave turn, then probably cutting all the red tape, taking a firmer, straighter, and clear decision right from the top office is in the offing.
All right, Nikunj, appreciate you joining us with all of those details. So we will come back to you for more on this big update, because this meeting that has been that is now going to be chaired by Prime Minister Modi is also important, because it's coming just a few hours after the Ministry of External Affairs had given only 4 hours to Indian students which are in Kharkiv right now to ensure that they are out of that city as soon as possible, even if it means traveling by foot. And they had also said that, this advisory has to be taken very, very seriously. This advisory had come on the basis of inputs that they received from the Russian side. So clearly, all eyes are going to be on this key meeting and what comes out. Nikunj, we'll come back to you for more on this. But thank you for the moment for joining us with all those details. Let's now move on. And we have with us Suresh Kumar Goel, former ambassador, also now joining us on the broadcast. And soon in Urban Debate, we will bring to you latest from Ukraine as well as Poland. We'll show you the ground reports. We'll tell you what's happening on the ground right now after this advisory was issued by the Indian government. Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goel, yesterday, clearly the focus was that maybe there was no contingency plan in place. Did India delay the evacuation was a cause of concern. But today, the advisory that has gone from India to Indian nationals in Kharkiv specifically, what do you make of it? And especially because it came on the inputs given by Russia.
Heena, right? You see, any
Yes.
action on evacuation would depend upon the assessment of the mission and the related authorities in terms of what do they see the threat perception to the Indian community, and in this particular case, the Indian students over there, and how best they can deal with that kind of a contingency. Now, having said that, yesterday in Kiev, the Indian embassy had issued the advisory asking the students to leave Kiev either way, without suggesting how they should leave. As such an advisory had been issued for them to leave Kiev without waiting for anything else. And they had in fact specified that they should do it yesterday itself. The issue here really is that when you want to evacuate people, it's a very dicey situation. So let me put it very carefully. The expectation of the people to be evacuated is that the government of India, through the embassy, would be able to put in place proper systems for travel of the Indian nationals through the zone of disturbance, in this case the war, to the point from where they would be evacuated. To give you an example, if you recall the case of Afghanistan, which is the most recent one, while a flight had been arranged from the airport, from the Kabul airport, the issue really was how to get our nationals, how to get the Indians from wherever they were to the airport. And that proved to be the huge challenge. In this case also, the challenge is how do you get those students from where they are to the point from where they would be evacuated. And in this case, that point, that process lies in Ukraine, not in Romania, not in Russia, not in Belarus, but the Ukrainian territory through which they have to travel to get to the points of evacuation. Yes, Heena, I think I've said enough on that one question.
Well, yes, and now the latest is that Prime Minister Modi has called for another high-level meeting at around 8:30. So, of course, focus will be on what comes out of that, because the situation clearly seems to be getting out of control, Ambassador Goel. Now, at the same time, we have seen certain, nuclear threats coming from Russia. What do you make of those? Can these be taken seriously at a time when, sanctions clearly are being announced against Russia, and, that is going to have an economic consequence as well for that country?
Sanctions are a real threat to Russia. Yes, they would actually cause a lot of impact on the economy. But The sanctions have not stopped the war, and I don't think sanctions will have any impact on the war for the time being. At least till there is a certainty of the way Russia could be sure about the security for itself. Because the main issue really for the war here is the security of Russia and the security of Ukraine, the whole European security architecture. So once that happens, the war will end, but till that time, the threat remains. Coming to the nuclear war scenario, I sincerely hope, because if there is no doubt that the situation is very, very critical, the war is still going on, but if the war escalates, there is a serious risk of nuclear weapons coming into the play and it turning into a nuclear war, in which case nothing is safe anymore. But I do hope, and my sincere belief is that everyone in the theater, everyone concerned knows fully well the consequences of a nuclear war, and they will not go to that precipice. Last one thing which I wanted to say at that time is also, I think there is a very, very encouraging news. And that news is that Russia is said that it is working on creating a safe passage for the Indian students in Ukraine to get to the borders. And I think the first one of that would really be Kharkiv, because that is the closest to the Russian border. And if a safe passage can be created for the students from Kharkiv to travel to the Russian border, half, in fact, I would say 70% of the problem could be resolved.
Okay. Now, clearly, Ambassador Suresh, in situations like these, when there's a real war happening, it's not really easy for people as well to try and move to safer zones. What kind of challenges, do you think are there for them? And are we on the right track? Because advisories clearly have been coming continuously, but then the situation also is very, very difficult. Just before we came to you, we were speaking to advisor to Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine, and she was trying to tell us that the situation is quite hard because the areas that we are talking about, Kharkiv specifically and earlier Kherson, all have been surrounded by Russian troops. There is shelling happening, and it's in Kharkiv only that first Indian casualty was reported yesterday. Naveen died because of shelling.
There is a bit of a mismatch here. I call it a mismatch because I fully appreciate what the culture minister for Ukraine was saying, that the place had been surrounded by the Russians, etc., etc. But the reports I have been getting also from Kharkiv and Kyiv and the other places is that while there is fighting on the roads, the trains were still operating. And yesterday, when our embassy had issued the advisory for the students to leave Kyiv and get to the train stations, that was, to the best of my belief, on the basis of certain amount of assurance given by the Ukrainian authorities that once the students can get to the train station, they will be allowed to board the special trains which will carry them to the western borders. That didn't happen. And in fact, what happened instead is that the Indian students who had boarded the train, they were practically thrown out, pushed out of the train, and their place was instead given to the Ukrainians. I can fully appreciate that for the Ukrainian government, the priority would be for the Ukrainian nationals. But the fact is that if the trains were allowed to run with the Indian students, they could have reached the western borders from where they could be evacuated. Therefore, in a wartime scenario, every country, every side will have a different priority. In this case, for Ukraine, Indian students were not the priority. And that's the reason I'm saying that they will have to find another escape route within Ukraine itself. And if Russians can provide that route, all the better.
That's an important point that you're making, but now, based on Russian input, this advisory has been given. Do you think the way India has abstained and from UN Security Council, at least on 2 occasions on a resolution, and India has neither supported Russia nor Ukraine. India so far has remained neutral. So Russia can help India get that safe passage for Indians from the eastern part?
That is what I heard the announcement or the assurance given by the Russian ambassador was. I hope it does translate effectively on ground and that such a safe passage can be provided.
Ambassador Suresh Goel, I'm just requesting you to stay on with us because we are also now getting information about the evacuation effort. Of course, more and more flights are expected to, be there, are expected to operate over the next few days. And 15 flights have already returned with more than 3,350 Indians coming back since 26th of February. Union Minister Smriti Irani, Gajendra Singh Shekhawat, etc., received the students at the airport. Over 1,000 Indians have been brought back today itself. Here's what they had to say after coming back.
Happy and healthy, and I hope कि बाकी जो बचे हुए students और Indian citizens हैं उनको भी जल्दी से जल्दी निकाला जाए.
Yeah, everyone is sleeping, eating, drinking there in the basement. I request you one thing to the government, that people in the eastern side, please let them get evacuated as soon as possible, because from the west we could all reach the border.
I thought of coming, like I had booked the ticket for 8th March. I thought it will be okay because all our teachers said it will be okay, only study, because we were in the safe city and nothing was happening. After 3 days, from our college has evacuated till the border. From there we took till today to come to India.
From the university, where university has arranged some buses for us to reach the border. From the border, we walk for few distance, like total around 4 to 5 kilometers, I guess. Like even more or less, I don't know. Like I didn't count properly. Like just we came to the border. There were lots and lots of people. We waited for more than 1.5 days, almost 2 days, in the snow, in the cold. Like what would I say is it was difficult staying there.
ये कहना चाहूँगा सर, इन 15 दिनों के बाद सुकून की सांस मिली है सर. ऐसा लगता है कि सर मौत के मुंह से बाहर आए हूँ सर, बिल्कुल मौत को टच करके.
I am very thankful that India has enough care and support for the students and their children. No matter where they are, they still support them and bring them back.
And following Ukraine's invasion, several countries, including those in Europe and across the Atlantic Ocean, have closed their airspace to Russia. US is now the most recent to join the list. Mirror Now's Raksha explains.
Well, US President Joe Biden said in his State of the Union address that we are choking Russia's access. And if you look at this map right here, choking it is, because all the parts that you see covered in red are areas which have shut down their airspace for all flights emanating from Russia. In the northern hemisphere, if I talk of the 2 biggest airspaces, then it's USA and Canada, which are all in red, and Greenland, Iceland. We move towards UK, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Latvia, Romania, Switzerland. A lot of these countries here, actually, Poland, Norway. Only Belarus, which is one of the longest standing allies of Russia, which continues to stand by in this case. But all of these parts have now banned any flight that is owned, chartered, or controlled in any form by Russia to be flying in these airspaces. Now, this is, of course, a big economic pushback for the Kremlin. It's a lot of global supply chains will now be affected, especially for the Russian economy. But we cannot also forget how the people of Russia will also be suffering because of this move. All sorts of business travel, whether it's to the US, Chicago, London, all sorts of business travel now banned. Any kind of medical tourism, travel for education, all sorts of travel will now not be possible for any flight emanating from Russia. Apart from that, as I said earlier, the global supply chains, there are 70% of the flights that ply between EU and Russia. 70% of those flights are actually Russian flights. So there's going to be a big hit that Russia is going to take. Several leaders have made this move, of course, to sort of alienate Moscow and somehow as an attempt to convince Putin to end this reckless war against Ukraine.
So that is about the latest as far as closure of airspace for Russian aircraft is concerned by United States of America. Meanwhile, here in India, the family of Naveen, who lost his life in Kharkiv yesterday in shelling, is waiting for his mortal remains. Karnataka Chief Minister Babaye has assured the family of the deceased Indian student, the first Indian war casualty in the Russia-Ukraine war, that they are making all efforts to bring back the mortal remains of the student. Karnataka Chief Minister has also said that the government is in touch with Indian Embassy to secure the body and get it transferred here in India very soon. Listen in.
As far as Naveen is concerned, some of his friends have tried to send a photograph that has to be confirmed, and I am trying to send that photograph to MEA and confirm the whole thing, and we are in touch with the Indian Embassy also, and if they can secure that body, then they can transport later, but at least secure that body. We are trying to do our best.
And Times Network's Imran spoke to Naveen's father. Remember, the Indian student from Karnataka, Naveen lost his life in shelling as explosions rocked Kharkiv city yesterday. And here's what he told us.
Morning around 10 o'clock in our time, he called us. He was telling that just now we wake up. So the night they were in the bunker. He told after breakfast and again I will call you, like that, he told. So around 10 o'clock he called. Then after 1 hour we tried to contact him, because from last 1 week, 1 hour, 2 hour in between he was sending some message. We were calling him, so he was replying. So like that, yesterday also we tried from our side around 12 o'clock, but there was no his phone was ringing, so he was not attending the call. He thought maybe mobile charge problem, or maybe he's gone for take some bath, like that. So ultimately around 2 o'clock, I got the information from the Minister of External Affairs. They told the matter.
Okay. And they personally called you and informed you?
Pardon, sir?
Did they directly call you?
Yeah, directly they called me.
What time was it, sir, when you came to know?
Around 1:40 or 2 o'clock, in between 1:30 and 2 o'clock, sir.
Sir, the PM Prime Minister also spoke to you. Can you describe what did he say and what did he?
They said, I requested, I have lost my son, sir, but other around 1,000 students, still they are stuck in the danger zone. So somehow you will plan to lift those students who are stuck in the danger area. They promise, sir. So we will arrange everything. We are trying our level best. So like that they promise. And also requested to arrange my son's dead body to bring back to my native place. He is too, sir. So since from his primary education, he was brilliant. He was excellent in studies. In 10th also, he scored about 96%. In 12th also, he scored around 97%. But because of our Indian education system, reservation system, he unable to get the seat in India. So then his aim was to become a doctor. So he don't interested in other studies. So finally, my relations and friends, they told me to somehow you arrange. So they will also agree to for some financial help. So finally, he decided to go there, sir, for studying.
So he was studying medicine in Ukraine?
Yeah, he was studying MBBS, sir. He was in fourth year.
Let's now tell you how the situation is in Poland right now. My colleague Yogesh is joining us live from Poland. Remember, Indian students have also been asked to reach Poland, the neighboring country of Ukraine. Yogesh, can you tell us अभी आप exactly कहाँ पे हैं और किस तरह की वहाँ पर अभी स्थिति बनी हुई है?
हिना, अभी मैं कल रात से यहाँ पे यूक्रेन और पोलैंड के बॉर्डर पे हूँ और यहाँ पे कल रात से और अभी तक मेरे सामने ऑलमोस्ट 800 स्टूडेंट रेस्क्यू किए गए हैं और अभी भी ये मेरे पीछे जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं, अभी 3 बसें हैं जो कि अभी वासवान के लिए निकल रहे हैं। ये लोग इंडियन एम्बेसी इनको कंटिन्यू रेस्क्यू कर रही है। कल से लेके अभी तक 800 के आसपास स्टूडेंट आ चुके हैं और अभी कुछ टाइम पहले वीके सिंह जो मिनिस्टर हैं वो भी यहाँ पे आए थे, उन्होंने भी स्टूडेंट से मुलाकात की है। अपना हेलो
जी,
मैं कुछ स्टूडेंट्स से बात कराना चाहूंगा आपकी। आप लोग कौन सी सिटी से आए हैं यूक्रेन में?
खार्किव से हैं। खार्किव नेशनल मेडिकल यूनिवर्सिटी से हैं।
आपने कुछ प्रॉब्लम फेस किया होगा वहाँ पे, उसके बारे में कुछ बताना चाहेंगे?
जी हाँ, बिल्कुल, हमने बहुत प्रॉब्लम फेस करा है वहाँ पे और आज हमें शायद 6वां या 7वां दिन है और 5-6 दिन से हम बंकर्स में थे, बॉम्ब शेल्टर्स में, मेट्रो में और हमें वगैरह की आवाज़ आती थी। ये सब
जो इस साइड में पोलैंड साइड में जो इंडियन एम्बेसी काम कर रही है उससे आप कितना संतुष्ट हैं?
इस वाली में ये नहीं खुली है, यहाँ पर बॉर्डर नया खुला है, इसमें बहुत जल्दी काम हुआ है।
बहुत जल्दी काम,
हमें ज़्यादा वेट नहीं करना पड़ा है।
आप?
मैं इंडियन एम्बेसी का बहुत शुक्रिया करना चाहूँगा कि हमें इस टाइम पे हेल्प की गई है। ये जो बॉर्डर नया खुला है इससे काफ़ी बच्चों को हेल्प मिल रही है और आने 2-3 दिन में शायद जितने बच्चे हैं उनको निकाल लेंगे यहाँ, जो बच्चे हैं खारकोव से। और हम थैंक यू बोलना चाहते हैं एम्बेसी का।
आप भी खारकोव से आए हैं?
जी, मैं भी खारकोव से हूँ।
अभी क्या सिचुएशन है वहाँ पे?
अभी काफी डेंजरस सिचुएशन है वहाँ पे, क्योंकि शायद हो सकता है कि कुछ दिन में और दिक्कत आ सकती है। तो हम बहुत खुश हैं कि हम निकाल दिए गए और बाकी स्टूडेंट्स जो बच्चे हैं वहाँ पे उन्हें भी निकाल दिया जाएगा वहाँ से। थैंक यू।
जी हिना
जी, आप अगर कुछ और लोगों से भी बात कर सके योगेश, और ये जानने की कोशिश करें कि किस तरह से वो यहाँ पर पहुंच पाए हैं। खार्किव से ये जो पोलैंड और यूक्रेन का बॉर्डर है ये कितना दूर है, क्योंकि अभी भी एक एडवाइजरी जारी की गई है इंडियन स्टूडेंट्स के लिए, लेकिन ट्रेन वगैरह में चढ़ पाना थोड़ा मुश्किल नजर आ रहा है। तो किस तरह से पहुंचे हैं ये लोग?
आप किस सिटी से आए हैं यूक्रेन में? किस तरह आए आप? क्या कन्वेंस यूज किया? किस तरह आए हैं? कब चले? ओके, किस सिटी से आए हैं आप? अपने बारे में बताएं, क्या प्रॉब्लम फेस किया आपने आने में?
थोड़ा रिस्क है
एक्चुअली हिना, अभी इनको ना निकलना है, यहाँ पे हमारे लिए रुके हुए थे, ये अभी लेट हो रहे हैं।
जी जी, नहीं, हम इनको रोकेंगे नहीं, बिल्कुल। योगेश, थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर जॉइनिंग अस एंड helping us understand how the situation is at the border area of Ukraine and Poland. We'll keep coming back to you for more on this. Ji, thank you. We'll keep coming back to you. Pradeep Datta, my colleague, is also joining us on the broadcast this evening. Pradeep, good evening. Where exactly are you right now, and what is the situation as far as rescue operation is concerned? Because an urgent appeal has now gone to students in Kharkiv.
You want me in trade?
Good evening, Heena. Right now, I'm here in Lviv, and the situation here continues to remain tense. With me is our colleague also, Jonathan. He's with me since morning. And the temperature might be dipping, but if we talk about the war front, in fact, the temperature is rising with each minute, and especially in Kharkiv area, which has come under a heavy attack from the Russian troops. Short while back, a cruise missile was fired from the Russian side. They have brought down the consular building. They have targeted the police headquarters there. Many people have been injured. We saw in the visuals that how people were lying on the ground. So the situation continues to remain here tense. And what is more problematic is that many people are still stuck up there in these areas. What actually the Russians are trying to do is that they are trying to occupy Kyiv because they feel that that's the only way they can push the Ukrainian forces to surrender and also bring in the regime change here in this region. But that's what they are looking at. The second worry is that the hand of the right now the Vladimir Putin is on the red button. That means anytime he can press the nuclear button, that's what they are threatening right now. That can be the blackmail tactics, because that's a worrisome aspect. Right now, I have got Jonathan with me and we'll be talking to Jonathan. How you see that humanitarian crisis? Many people just leaving this place for the safer shelter. 5 lakh people have already become refugees in their own homeland. So how you see this catastrophic situation?
Well, it's like nothing Europe has ever seen for at least the last 75 years. Surely since the end of World War II, we're getting figures of well in excess of 500,000 refugees have fled for the Polish border alone, which is just about an hour's drive west of here. And that's not to mention those who've gone across the other borders to Romania, Hungary and other adjacent sovereign states. It's quite extraordinary, just the sheer weight of humanity we're seeing on the move. As you know yourself, because you came through just this morning, didn't you? The tailbacks at the Polish border, the traffic tailbacks have gone up to like 20, 30 kilometers at times. So it's quite phenomenal, and it hasn't ended yet, because there are many cities, just like the one we're standing in here now, Lviv, with its population of under 1 million, that haven't yet been subject to full-scale military attack. Eventually and inevitably, one expects the bombs and the missiles will start falling here, which will prompt yet another vast exodus of refugees.
Yeah, see, the biggest concern is that Russians from day one, they had been maintaining that they are only targeting military installation. But if you look at the pictures on the ground, that narrates a different kind of a story. Many of those apartments have been targeted by the Russian troops. The Stinger missiles have been fired. They have also fired short-range ballistic missile, bringing down those buildings. And many people were lying injured under the debris of those buildings. So that's one of the reasons that there's a lot of fear among the people and panic among the people. The place where we are standing, normally this region is abuzz with activity. Let me show you, if you look at this region, but very few people right now are here. A reason being that anytime anything can happen, and that is in fact the only certainty and uncertain situation what we can expect in the war zone. That's what actually that people are afraid of. That's one of the reasons that since morning, while me and Jonathan were reporting from this region, there all of a sudden the sirens started blowing. We saw people running helter-skelter, and he asked me also to move towards the nearby lane, because I was so busy with the live, I didn't realize about the siren being blown at that time. So what we came to know later, that maybe the Russians have dropped a bomb somewhere nearby. That had led to the panic in this region also. So whenever any movement of the aircraft is seen, they start blowing sirens, asking people to stay indoors, because the best thumb rule that applies to the people here is that you should be in your basement areas in case of bombing, and also you should lie on the ground whenever there is any movement of any aircraft, because that's the only way you can prevent yourself from the shrapnels of those killer shells being fired by the Russian troops. So far, if you look at the situation on the ground regarding Operation Ganga, that's what actually the India is right now focusing on. 4 ministers are already at different points.
Right.
We saw that we have got Hardeep Singh Puri at Budapest. We have got General V.K. Singh, another union minister here in Poland border, where they were trying to evacuate people, because more and more students are to be evacuated at earliest. But still, there are some students who are stuck up at Kharkiv. Kharkiv is the area that is facing the brunt of Russian shelling and firing. And already we have seen the beeline of Russian tanks moving in. How do you see the situation unfolding in coming days?
In Kharkiv, for instance, well, I mean, look, we know how Russians wage war. We've seen them do it before in Syria. We've seen them do it in Chechnya. They are ruthless. They are utterly uncompromising. And their approach is essentially total war. They will shell the business out of a city until it's brought to its knees. Then they'll have softened it up for a ground assault. They'll send in the tanks. They'll eventually take over the buildings. If it's the capital, Kiev, they'll do their best to topple the government and install...
I will cut you short here, but one important point is that even West has betrayed Ukraine. They did it in Afghanistan. They did it here once again, because everybody was looking toward the West. They are the one, because it's a West-dominated world. But every time we have seen that West is looking after their own interests.
What you're saying is very, very important, but I have 2 specific questions now, Pradeep. One for you, one for Jonathan. Okay, I have 2 specific questions now, one for you, one for Jonathan. First, I want to ask you, you were in Poland yesterday. Today, you are reporting live from Ukraine, Western Ukraine, and Lviv is actually the largest city in Western Ukraine, which is considered to be slightly safer as compared to other parts of Ukraine. How did you manage to reach here? Was it difficult? How was the situation on the way? Tell us a little bit about your experience.
It was Hina, it was not easy. In fact, yesterday only I had my meals. Since then, I haven't taken anything because it took me about 16 hours to reach this area. Normally, it would have taken about 5 to 6 hours. Reason being, because at several places the barricades have been raised, so movement is not that smooth. So we have to cross those barricades. And then there are several points where they check, they ask for the documents, make you come down. It takes about 2 to 3 hours. And finally, I reached this place. It was about 16 hours. And then on way, I saw that large number of people trying to flee from this area. They were trying to move towards the safer places. That's what me and Jonathan were talking about, the humanitarian crisis, the catastrophic situation here, where the people which they haven't seen in the past ever in Europe, but this thing has happened for the first time in their own homeland. They have become refugees. They are looking for the safer passage, the safer zones they can flee towards. Women, children crying, moving towards the safer areas. That's what exactly is happening here. But what is really heartening is that I just want to share one thing. While me and Jonathan were reporting about, despite this tragic movement, so many things happening, 2 girls came and they gave us the chocolate. They said that since morning you had been reporting, you must not have taken anything. They gave us this chocolate. I think I'm carrying this chocolate as a souvenir back home. This will remind me of the big-hearted Ukrainians. Despite so many difficulties, so many problems, so many tragedies that have stuck up during the last few days, they still have that heart. I think all these countries need to learn from these children that you will not gain anything out of this war. All you will gain is about peace, from peace and love, which you are going to shower at each other. I think that's what actually the Indian diplomacy is all about. India has also been talking about amicably resolving this issue.
Absolutely.
Now, today evening, anytime there is going to be a conversation between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Vladimir Putin, maybe once again the Prime Minister will be insisting on these things.
In fact, yesterday when we were speaking to you and Jonathan, Pradeep, when you were in Poland and Jonathan was in Ukraine, at that time, Pradeep, Jonathan showed us the visuals wherein we saw people of Ukraine coming out and they were volunteering, they were helping others who were in need, they were offering food to them, some were even asking them to come and stay with them in case they don't have any place to stay because it's extremely cold there. Now, as I wanted to ask one more question before I let you guys go and quickly grab a bite, Jonathan, I want to ask you specifically, the western part of Ukraine is being considered slightly safe right now. East and other regions are a little tricky, are being seen as a bit dangerous. Russian military claims to have taken control of Ukraine's Kherson. Now we are getting to know it's very, very close to Kharkiv and something dangerous might happen. And that's the reason why this advisory has been given to the students to come out of Kharkiv. What is the latest that you can share with us about Kharkiv and about the capital city, Kyiv?
Hina wants to know that what latest you can share about the Kharkiv, because already we have seen that the Kharkiv has faced the brunt of the Russian troops during the last few days. So what's the situation right now as compared to this region? That is the most dangerous frontier right now.
There's absolutely no comparison with this city whatsoever. Kharkiv is the second largest city in Ukraine, as we know, about 1.5 million inhabitants, but it has the misfortune of being immensely strategically important. It's not only is it further east than Kiev, therefore it is between Kiev and the breakaway Donbass, Luhansk regions, and also, of course, from where the majority of the Russian armor is coming from. So they would have had to take Kharkiv regardless, but they're also sending out a message that this is how we intend to wage the war. It's almost a template, if you like, because it's been absolutely unrelenting. We're hearing that there's barely, these are the words of the mayor of Kharkiv, there's barely a building left in the city that hasn't been struck by a shell or a missile. So they are going all out, the Russians. They want to make an example of Kharkiv. They are going to essentially level it to the ground, and Kiev is next.
So why actually the Kharkiv is facing the brunt of the Russian troop? Reason is that one has to understand the trajectory, because they are coming from the Russian side into the Donbass zone, from the Donbass to Kharkiv, and road to Kyiv is through Kharkiv. That's one of the reasons that the people they are facing the brunt, and the Kharkiv has been under attack from the Russian troops from day one, and where they had been fired more than 350 short-range ballistic missile, and we have seen that almost many buildings have been completely decimated and flattened, and that's really a matter of concern, because if this is going to increase, obviously there's going to be human tragedy, and nobody will expect this thing from any civilized nation at this stage, because at a time when we are talking about humanitarian
while you
things,
were speaking, Pradeep,
that
we could
human
hear
rights,
siren behind
that how
you.
come you just
What is
violate human
happening?
rights? Because we have seen that. Yes. See, this is in fact a mock drill right now going on, because they keep on blowing sirens so that people are aware that if any such eventuality is there, they are prepared how to deal with that situation, how to flee towards the safer places, what actually the measures they have to take, and what should be the standard operation procedure they need to follow. Because in such situation, I had been covering the shelling in the past also from the line of control. We have seen that whenever there is a shelling, the best option is that lie on the ground, your stomach touching the ground. That's what actually you have to do. That is the only way you can prevent yourself from the flying splinters of the shells being fired by the enemy. That is what exactly the same procedure is being taught to the people here, and mock drill is going on. But yes, daytime, there was a siren. That time we came to know from, that was the Jonathan came to know that how somebody, one of the Russian aircraft has dropped bomb nearby, because of which there was a lot of panic and people started running helter-skelter. I think you were the one who immediately asked me to rush towards the nearby lane.
Yeah, when you hear an air raid siren in the middle of a war, it is advisable to get shelter, I would say, pretty quickly. I actually don't know if there were any bombs nearby or if that was a test, if you like, if it was a drill, but it was certainly pretty scary. And the people here are on their toes. They're really on the edge of their nerves, because they switch on their TVs, they can see what's happening in Kharkiv, they can see what's happening in Kiev and Mariupol and Kherson now, and they know it's probably only a matter of time until this city is next.
Last point here I want to make, that people may be leaving Ukraine for the safer shelter. But here, the Times Now, Mirror Now, and others, we have an unwritten commitment with the viewers that news at any cost, come what may be. And we'll keep on getting you the latest updates from the war zone that's considered to be most dangerous frontier right now of the world.
All right. Thank you very much, Pradeep, as well as Jonathan. Appreciate both of you for joining us live from Lviv in Ukraine and helping us understand how the situation is on the ground. Requesting both of you to stay safe as well. It is day 7 of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And Russia, in fact, has intensified its attack as we speak. That's the update we are getting, especially from cities like Kharkiv and others.